3 weeks. That's all it took for Jason to slide into the chair his mother once called the only throne that ever mattered. Hannah wasn't cold in the ground. The roses were still fresh in the dirt. I still found her hair on the pillow. But he was already parking in the reserved spot marked CEO, walking through the front doors like he'd earned something. He hadn't built this place. He hadn't stayed up until 2 a.m. with Hannah writing strategy decks or flown economy just to pitch investors who never called back. He'd never mortgaged a home to cover payroll. But there he was, 30 floors up, in a suit 2 sizes too new, giving hallway nods to people who still whispered his mother's name like it was holy. Jason had her jawline, that sharp, angular defiance, but none of her spine, none of her grit. She started this company in the corner of a rented co-working space with no heat and mice that scratched the walls at night. He started in an Ivy League dorm with fast Wi-Fi and espresso on tap. And now he had her office. He didn't speak at the funeral. Said he couldn't. But he found the breath to schedule a board vote 2 days later. And just like that, the papers were signed. CEO Jason Miller. Former. Hannah Miller. Deceased. I didn't argue. I didn't even attend the vote. Grief is a kind of fog, and I let it keep me blind. But 5 days into his new reign, at precisely 9:12 a.m., his assistant tapped me on the shoulder. Her nails were red, her tone rehearsed. Mr. Miller would like to see you. Mr. Miller. I followed her down the hall. My hands were still stiff from yard work that morning. I wore my usual brown blazer, worn cuffs, button-down shirt Hannah had ironed for me once years ago. I hadn't changed my wardrobe since she died. Habit or protest, I wasn't sure. The door was open when I arrived. Jason stood behind her desk. Not beside it, behind it. Like he owned its history. He was fiddling with a pen. A Mont Blanc. Hannah's old one, the one I gave her when we landed our first Series B. I remember engraving the inside of the cap myself. For the architect of everything. Now he rolled it between his fingers like it meant nothing. He didn't look at me. Just pointed to a folded letter on the edge of the desk. Didn't say sit. Didn't say good morning. Restructuring, he muttered. His voice cracked slightly, but he recovered. I didn't reach for the paper immediately. I looked at the room instead. The rug was different. The light dimmer. The scent of her lavender diffuser gone. Replaced with something colder. Vetiver and ambition. Jason finally looked up. His eyes were steel. Or tried to be. Behind them I saw the flicker of uncertainty. A boy rehearsing a man's lines. We need leaner leadership, he said. Faster decision-making. You understand. I picked up the paper. Memorandum of Termination. Executive Advisor. Provisional. Dated. Signed. Effective immediately. No mention of service. No thank you for loyalty. No condolence for the woman I'd buried with my bare hands. I nodded once. Slipped the letter into my coat pocket. My fingers didn't shake. My jaw didn't clench. Not yet. Jason stepped back from the desk, trying to look busy. As if to say, this isn't personal. But everything about it was personal. I had raised him. Not from birth, no. His father had that honor, the same way a storm has the honor of flattening a house. But I was the one who stayed. He was 11 when Hannah married me. A quiet, angry child who wore headphones to dinner and never said thank you. I taught him how to tie a tie, how to change a flat, how to look someone in the eye during hard conversations. We shared 2 Father's Day breakfasts. Not because he wanted to, because she asked him to. By college, he'd softened. Called me Dad once when he was drunk. Then walked it back the next morning. But I paid his tuition, paid his rent, paid his therapist, his spring break, his new laptop when the old one caught a virus. I never kept receipts, never counted the zeros. I was building something, a future, maybe, a bond, or at least the illusion of one. Now here he was, firing me. I stood still for a moment, let the silence stretch. Jason fidgeted, adjusted his watch, cleared his throat. You have anything to say? He asked. I thought about it. I thought about telling him what it cost to build this place. Not in dollars, but in nights I didn't sleep, dinners I missed, blood I cleaned from Hannah's hand after she punched a wall in frustration. I thought about saying, "Your mother would be ashamed." But I didn't. They never handle silence well. I just nodded, turned, walked out. Each step felt heavier than the last. The door clicked shut behind me. Down the hall, I passed portraits. Hannah shaking hands with governors, smiling beside investors, holding up awards. Jason's face didn't appear in a single one. He didn't exist in the company's history, but he thought he owned its future. As I rode the elevator down, the city unfolded like a cruel map. Denver in winter, gray, grim, cold enough to kill the weak. I reached the lobby. The receptionist smiled at me, unaware. I smiled back, mechanical, polite, dying inside. In the parking garage, I sat in my truck for a long time. No music, no engine, just the sound of my own breath. Steady, controlled. Then I opened my laptop. No hesitation, no second-guessing. One email, one line, to the lawyer who'd handled our filings for years. Subject: Activate Clause 12. 1. Nothing else. No threats. No preamble. 2 hours later, she replied. Understood. It'll be ready by Monday. I stared at the screen. My reflection hovered over the words. A man fading into the background of his own life. But something sharp had begun to wake inside me. I wasn't here to reclaim power. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was about to remind Jason what his mother built, and who she built it with. Jason thought the crown sat easy on his head. He paraded through the hallways that week like he'd always belonged at the center. Sat in meetings he didn't understand. Nodded at terms he couldn't define. Talked over people who had built the bones of this company when he was still learning long division. He changed the branding on the website, approved a new ad campaign, fired 2 project managers for being too cautious. He liked big moves. He thought big moves meant leadership. But he never opened the company archive. Never touched the box marked 2018, legal/ownership, confidential. Hannah had signed those documents herself. I sat beside her in the lawyer's office. She wore a gray scarf that day, because the chemo had taken everything else. She was tired. I remember that. Her hands shook when she signed. But her voice was strong. Put it in writing, she told the attorney. If I die, he doesn't get it all. The lawyer hesitated. You mean David? No, Hannah interrupted. I mean Jason. If he wants to take over, he earns it. I've seen enough of his father in him to know what happens when you hand power to someone who hasn't been broken yet. She never said those words again. But the clause stayed. Clause 12. 1. In the event of the founder's death, shares held in her name will default to joint majority ownership between surviving spouse and board of trustees until reviewed under merit provision. Jason never asked who wrote that clause. He never even read the register. He thought she died without a plan. He thought the will was clean, the crown unchallenged. He thought I was a shadow, someone to brush aside after the eulogy. I let him think it. I came in every morning after that like nothing had changed. Brought my own coffee, kept my head down, did what I'd always done, maintain the foundation. Jason didn't look me in the eye after the termination, but I watched him. He held power like a boy holds a loaded gun. Arms shaking, heart racing, no idea when it might go off. He surrounded himself with yes-men, flatterers, people who said visionary and bold, while whispering behind closed doors that he was in over his head. He started reshuffling departments, laid off 3 women in finance, called it modernization, said it was about streamlining workflows, not cost-cutting. People nodded, but they stopped smiling in the break room. By Thursday, 2 internal complaints had reached HR. On Friday, the head of product quit. Jason stood in the glass conference room with his hands in his pockets, watching her walk out. He didn't say a word. He didn't offer a counter. He just adjusted his sleeve. And that was the moment I knew. He didn't want to lead. He wanted to be seen leading. I remembered Hannah's voice again. If he wants it, he earns it. He hadn't earned it. So I went home that weekend and dusted off the file Hannah never let out of her sight. The original 2018 share register. Black binder, heavy spine, her initials in silver ink. Inside, page 43. It was there. 2 signatures. Hers and mine. She had named me primary co-owner. 51% majority. Silent until triggered by clause 12. 1. No revocation without her signature. And she was gone. Jason never asked what was in the safe. Never thought I had keys. I had all of them. That Sunday I sat at the kitchen table. The house was still too quiet. Hannah's absence echoed in every creak of the floor. Her tea mug still sat near the sink. Lipstick faded but not gone. I opened my laptop. The lawyer's reply sat at the top of my inbox. Subject: Clause 12. 1. Activation timeline confirmed. I read it 3 times. Each line clearer than the last. By Monday morning, I wouldn't be just the grieving widower. I would be majority shareholder. The audit team was already scheduled. Jason had no idea. He spent that Sunday golfing with 2 board members. I saw the pictures on LinkedIn. Him laughing too loud, holding a club like a man who didn't know his hands were shaking. The caption read, "Proud to carry on her vision." Her vision. He meant the version of her he'd created in his head. The one who forgave easily. Who passed down kingdoms like heirlooms. The one who wouldn't dare question her only son. He never knew the Hannah I married. The Hannah who bled into this company. Who kept receipts. Who built futures like fortresses and never handed out keys for free. He never knew how she looked at him after his 3rd failed internship. "He wants the reward," she whispered to me one night. But not the burden. Now he had both. And he had no idea what it would cost. I printed the audit documents myself. Signed my name where it mattered. Left the rest untouched. Then I ironed my shirt. Same one I wore to her funeral. Same one I wore when we bought the building. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in her chair. I watched the sun rise without speaking. By Monday, everything would be different. But I wouldn't raise my voice. They never handle silence well. I arrived 15 minutes early. Not to prepare. Not to gloat. I just liked watching the office come to life. That was Hannah's habit. She said you could tell who mattered by who showed up when no one was watching. I kept that ritual alive. I stood by the glass elevator and watched the staff trickle in. Shoulders hunched, coffee in hand, not yet wearing their masks. They didn't expect anything today. That was the point. Jason walked in at 9:47. Late. He wore sunglasses. Indoors. Held them too long in his hand like he'd forgotten they were even there. His phone was at his ear, but he wasn't really talking, just murmuring phrases to some investor who wanted to believe he knew what he was doing. I let him pass me in the hall without a word. He didn't notice. At exactly 9:59 a.m., I stood in the reception area. 2 people in suits waited beside me. Clean folders. Serious faces. Internal audit neutral third party. I didn't hire them. I didn't have to. The company's governance procedures required quarterly reviews under a shareholder trigger. Clause 12. 1 didn't just hand me votes. It handed me visibility. At 10 a.m. Sharp, Jason turned the corner. His steps slowed. He saw the suits. He saw me. The color drained from his face before he even read the papers. "What's this?" he asked, half laughing. "A review." I said nothing. Just handed him my copy. Already signed. Already sealed. He flipped through the first 3 pages. Each line a quiet confession of what he hadn't seen. He scanned the letterhead. Legal. Binding. Clause 12. 1. I said calmly. His head snapped up. That clause doesn't. He stopped. He didn't know what it did, because he had never read it. His mouth opened, then shut. His hands trembled slightly as he held the page. He looked down again, and this time he found the number. Majority shareholder, David W. Harper, 51%. He didn't understand what it meant. Not at first. The audit team took over. Professional. Clinical. One sat down with Jason and began reviewing recent personnel decisions. The other turned to me and asked if I had the supplemental memo from legal. I handed it over. Quiet. Measured. It wasn't revenge. It was balance. Jason's voice rose once. Some muttered objection about respecting her vision. The word her came out strangled. He didn't know that her vision included safeguards. He didn't know that Hannah had once told me, "If he tries to sell it, you stop him." She never trusted him with permanence. She loved him, but she didn't believe in him. And now the company believed in me again. Not out of sentiment, because the ledger did. I was back. Not because I demanded it, because the paperwork was airtight. He stood in the doorway after the auditors packed their things. Shell-shocked, silent. The letter in his hand looked heavier now, like it weighed more than he could carry. "You knew," he said. "Yes," I replied. "You let me take the job." "No," I corrected. "You took it. I just didn't stop you." He shook his head. "You could have said something." I looked him dead in the eyes. "You fired me 5 days after we buried her. You sat in her chair and told me the company didn't need me anymore. So I left." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I continued. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't fight for my title, because I don't need a title to hold what's mine." He turned, muttered something about calling the board. I didn't stop him. Let him burn whatever goodwill he had left. By 10:47 a.m., the damage was clear. I wasn't just back. I was in charge. Quietly, legally, permanently. The chair was still his for now. But the room answered to me. Jason didn't say goodbye. He just left. Didn't even grab his coat. Walked out like a man who forgot where the exits were. I watched through the glass. He stood by the elevator for nearly a full minute before pressing the button. Shoulders squared in defiance or defeat. Hard to tell the difference when you're 28 and the floor just gave out beneath you. The audit team filed their final paperwork and handed it to legal. Everything was formal now. It wasn't drama. It was documentation. At 10:02 a.m., I stepped back into the office I had once been reduced to visitor in. Not Hannah's corner suite. I left that untouched. Let the ghost rest. I returned to my desk, my chair, my laptop, still bookmarked to her last budget sheet. I didn't call a meeting, didn't summon the board. I just sat down, booted the system, opened the first report. The numbers hadn't changed. Only the names had. I signed off on the vendor contracts Jason had paused. Rescued 2 proposals he'd ignored. Reapproved a maternity leave request HR had flagged under budget concerns. No speeches. No mission statements. Just corrections. Quiet ones. By 10:03 a.m., I exhaled. Not loudly. Not theatrically. Just enough to feel the tension leave my ribcage. Weeks of silence. Of pretending I was fine. Of nodding while my stepson tried to rewrite the history he didn't help build. I felt the truth settle in me like stone. I was never supposed to be here. Not in his eyes. To Jason, I was a footnote in Hannah's story. The man she married after his father vanished. The one who showed up at school plays. The one who drove across the state when he crashed his car freshman year and didn't call home. The one who held her hand during chemo while he posted filtered sunsets from Bali. He called me old man behind closed doors. I knew. The staff heard. People talk. But I never corrected him. I was never after a title. I was after stability, continuity, fairness. Jason thought inheritance was power. But power isn't given. It's earned. Or defended. And when he failed to defend it, it came back to me. Not through a fight. Through the very clause he ignored. I stayed quiet for 3 weeks. I buried the woman I loved. Sat beside her in a suit I haven't worn since. Ate condolences on paper plates. Answered calls from relatives who never visited. I stood beside Jason at her memorial. I watched him speak into the microphone with a voice he borrowed from someone else, hollow, practiced, performative. He talked about continuing her dream, but he never understood the cost of that dream. I did, because I helped build it. Not on dreams, on debt, on 12-hour shifts, on watching her miss Christmas because she was saving the company, on opening envelopes marked final notice and turning them into signed term sheets 6 weeks later. He inherited the empire, but he never felt the weight of building it. That's why he failed. And me? I didn't feel victorious. There was no vindication in it. The silence afterward was the real reward. The absence of chaos. The absence of watching her name be used like a resume bullet. A junior analyst, Sarah, passed by my desk around 10:20. "You're still here?" she asked, half laughing. I looked up. "Yeah." She didn't press. Just smiled and kept walking. She didn't know what happened. Not really. To her, I was just the man who fixed things without fanfare. Who still showed up early. Who still brought the same coffee thermos from 15 years ago. Jason's name disappeared from the org chart 3 days later. He didn't fight it. Maybe someone told him what Clause 12.1 meant in full. Or maybe he just knew the room didn't belong to him anymore. He tried to call me once. Late at night. Blocked number. I let it ring out. No voicemail. No apology. He never came back. A month later I had dinner alone. Same spot Hannah and I used to go on anniversaries. The waiter still remembered her. Asked how she was. I said she was gone. He nodded and brought me her usual anyway. I didn't finish it. It's hard to eat when you're still carrying ghosts. But I sat there. Paid the bill. Tipped too much. Went home to an empty bed and a house that still smelled like her shampoo. Grief doesn't end. But it softens. And silence is its own kind of healing. Sometimes I wonder if Jason will ever understand what he gave up. What he burned through in those 5 days between her funeral and the termination letter. What kind of man signs a document like that while his mother's voice still echoes in the halls? He'll inherit other things someday. Money, property, the things lawyers put in folders. But he won't inherit this company. He lost that because he thought being her son was enough. It wasn't. She built with sweat. He showed up in a suit. He thought power was proximity. He forgot it comes with consequence. So now I sit with this truth. Quietly. I was never his father. But I was the one who stayed. And in the end, the company stayed with me. Not because I demanded it. Because it remembered. So now I ask you, was I wrong to reclaim what we built? Was I cruel for letting him fail on his own terms? Or was it the only way left to protect the last thing that still had her name on it? Would you have endured it? Or would you have stayed silent, until the silence taught him what blood never did? You tell me.